For this assignment, we're going to create two different images by playing around with shutter speed, aperture, and ISO on the Canon Photo Simulator. Just a quick review before we jump into the simulator. Each of these three things control how much light enters the camera, but they each have secondary responsibilities too. Shutter speed, for example, is how quickly the shutter speed opens, so that determines how much light is being let into the camera and for how long. So if we have a slow shutter speed, that means the shutter is open longer and lets in more light, which can sometimes create a blurred image. A faster shutter speed, on the other hand, blinks pretty quickly and it freezes the motion so it looks pretty crisp. Aperture refers to the size of the hole that light is entering the camera. So a large aperture tends to let in a lot of light, but that also means we can get away with a faster shutter speed. This creates a shallow depth of field and a blurrier background. Now, a smaller aperture or a smaller hole tends to need a slower shutter speed to let in more light, and this creates a larger depth of field or a clearer background. Finally, let's talk about ISO. This is the sensitivity to either the sensor or the film. The more sensitive an ISO is, the more light it is able to take. That is great, but it also can create digital noise, so you need to be mindful of what your ISO level is in order to create a crisp photo. So for our first image, we want to make sure that the photo of the airplane has a blurred propeller. So I'm going to hop into the Canon Photo Simulator. So if we want our motion to be blurred, we're going to use shutter speed. And we want to make sure that our shutter speed is slower so it lets in that light and blurs that motion. Just like our triangle of exposure taught us, anything we do with one will need to adjust the others. So take a peek at your aperture. That controls the depth of field, and we want this aperture to be in the mid-range. Next, let's look at the light meter underneath our viewfinder. So here we can see that it says very exposed, and the +3 is highlighted. This means that too much light is entering the sensor, so we need to make the ISO a little less sensitive. Once you're happy with your settings, you're going to click on the camera button. And this is great because it lets you double check your work, because it tells you how your exposure is, what your depth of field is, what your motion is like, and it also reminds you of the settings that you used. Now that you've done your first photo with blurred motion, you're going to take a screenshot using the snipping tool, make sure to get your whole page, and then upload to Edio. For our second image, we're going to take another photo of the plane, but instead of having our propellers be blurred, we're going to capture that motion so it's frozen. So if I want to capture the motion, I want to make sure that I have a really quick shutter speed. Now that I've set a faster shutter speed to capture the motion, I have to balance it out with a larger aperture so I can make sure enough light enters my sensor. Now remember, it's a little confusing. The smaller the number for aperture, the larger the opening. So we are actually going to have a smaller f-stop number. Now the final piece of the puzzle, I'm going to check out that light meter and I can see that this is very underexposed. So I'm going to go back to my ISO and I'm going to play around with that until it says good exposure or that number is at 0. Once you're happy with your settings, you're going to click on the camera button, double check your work, make sure that it says good exposure. You're going to want a shallow depth of field. It's going to tell you about your motion, and you're going to be able to see what settings you used to achieve that photo. You're also going to want to make sure you screenshot this using the snipping tool in order to upload it into Edio.